I'm here today to present a geospatial platform to connect birders with migration and conservation. We call it the Bird Migration Explorer. And I want to acknowledge my co-authors from Audubon, Erika Knight, Lotem Taylor, Connor Bailey, John Mahoney, and Jill Deppe, as well as Daniel Huffman of Something About Maps. A recent landmark study told us that we lost 2.5 billion migratory birds in the last 50 years. And another recent study by Audubon told us that when we look at climate changes that are coming, 389 species are on the brink. So whether we look backward in time or forward in time, science tells us that we need to act now to protect migratory birds. And Dr. Thomas Lovejoy says, if you take care of the birds, you take care of most of the big problems in the world. And that's because birds are an indicator of ecosystem health. They need clean air, clean water, open spaces, and access to food just like we do, and they're found through all parts of the world. With those things in mind, we started Audubon's Migratory Bird Initiative to secure the future of North American migratory birds by taking actions to protect the places that matter most and reducing threats and engaging people in the joy of migration. And as part of the Migratory Bird Initiative, we developed the Bird Migration Explorer. The Explorer is a first-of-its-kind tool featuring 458 migratory species, including more than 9,000 bird tracks, 4 million bird location connections, and 443 eBird abundance models. The Explorer engages people across the hemisphere in the joy of migration and connects science to conservation and advocacy. For this project, bird tracking data were contributed by hundreds of migration researchers, and I wanted to tell you about some of the ways that we track migratory birds. The oldest way is a simple metal band that's stamped with an identifier and put around a bird's leg. When this bird is re-encountered and that is reported to the U.S. Geological Survey, then we have information on 2 points in time and 2 locations that that same individual was found. And through this type of tracking, we have several million point-to-point connections. Another type is automated telemetry. This is called the MODIS network, where there's a telemetry unit on the back of a bird, and when they fly past a stationary tower, it pings the tower so that we know the bird was in the area. We also have light level geolocators. The advantage of these is that they're very, very small and lightweight, just a few grams, and allowing us to put them on very small birds. The data precision is fairly low. They'll tell us where a bird is within about 100 kilometers of precision. However, without these, there would be many species that we wouldn't even be able to track. And the last kind, and really the best, is satellite data, transmitters like GPS that we're all so familiar with. They give us the highest accuracy and they give us the highest frequency of data. The disadvantage is that they're relatively large and heavy, so we can only use bigger bodied birds to track them. A major data source for the Bird Migration Explorer is eBird. eBird has developed species distribution models that they call status and trends products, and these fill in the gaps between bird sightings using highly sophisticated modeling. The models output species occurrence and abundance estimates across the hemisphere in weekly time steps at a 3-kilometer resolution. And finally, we have conservation challenge layers. These are hemispheric data layers that represent things that could threaten migratory birds, like urban areas, agriculture, and energy development from sources like Esri, NASA, and USGS. And if you're interested in this part of the Explorer, stay tuned for Lotem Taylor's presentation next, which will be focused entirely on the conservation challenges part. So I wanted to tell you about some of our goals for data visualization and processing. First is that we needed the Explorer to cover the entire Western Hemisphere so that we're capturing the full annual cycle of these migratory species. We also wanted it to represent data at a hemispheric scale and at a local scale, so we summarized everything at two different resolutions. We needed to distill terabytes of complex data into easily understandable visualizations and accommodate color blindness and other types of accessibility. We also need to be able to see an entire migratory pathway in a single view. And so this ruled out the use of a 3D scene where you would have to partially rotate the globe in order to see all the way from the Arctic to the southern tip of South America. We also didn't want to use a web Mercator projection because we wanted these maps to really help people understand that birds are migrating around a globe. We had binned data that would look very distorted. So we chose to go for an equal area projection in an interactive mapping interface. Movement is a really important part of these maps. And so the data are time enabled and the maps themselves are playable so that they're animated. Our processing was automated by writing scripts in R and Python. And the data were housed in the cloud on AWS and then processed using an EC2 instance. We performed cartographic design and animation in ArcPro using ArcPy. And then we took those templates to publish the data services in ArcGIS Online. The maps are interactive and were customized through Esri's JavaScript API. The whole Explorer is built on Esri technology. And there's a custom data citation system, so every map in the Explorer lists the data sources specific to the map that you're viewing. We did this by putting our citations into Zotero and then using that API to link up with our files on ArcGIS Online. All right, so now we're going to talk about 4 different takeaways from building the Explorer and some of the use cases for the Explorer. So now I'm going to start showing you examples and do some demos using the Live Explorer. Our first takeaway is that with the Bird Migration Explorer, you can view the pathways followed by 5,500 individual birds from 131 species as they traveled across the hemisphere. This map on the right is made up entirely of those tracks that were shared with us by migration scientists. And what I really love about this map is that there are no base data included, yet you can see so much geographic context in it. So as birds are flying around with these devices, they're tracing the outlines of continents, rivers, lakes, and mountain ridges. We had 2 main audiences for the Explorer, birders and bird curious, and conservationists and advocates. The Explorer helps birders and bird curious discover and experience the joy of migration by following birds year-round on their heroic journeys across the Americas. This is an example for Swainson's hawk, so I'm going to go ahead and open up the Explorer and show you what it looks like. This is the home page. And here we start out with a map of all of those 9,000 tracks for 131 species that I've mentioned. If I hover over the map, then I'll see an entire track for one individual tracked bird, and it'll tell me what species. And if I clicked on that, it would take me to that species migration map. In the sidebar, I can hover over a species and see all of the individuals tracked for that species. So I'm going to look up the Swainson's hawk, which is a species that lives in Oklahoma. So I thought it would be a good one to use for this presentation. Also, they have a really long migration down into South America. I'll click play, and now we can watch 86 different tracked birds on their annual cycle migration. So they're wintering in Argentina and Uruguay, passing back up through what we call the River of Raptors in Mexico, and then back into the Western United States. I can click pause, use this timeline to go back and check out something that interested me. I'm also able to zoom in and take a closer look. These circles are representing the eBird model so that we can see the abundance and distribution of this species across its full range. If I zoom in far enough, eventually I'll access the local scale of these data. Now, if I wanted to figure out, I'll go back to the beginning of the year, and if I was a birder and I wanted to figure out when could I see a Swainson's hawk in Oklahoma City, here we are at winter time where there are no hawks present because they're on their wintering grounds. And then as we slide over into spring, they start to appear. And as we get to early May, many of them are passing through on migration. Then there are fewer residing here in the summer. And on fall migration, we get a pulse of them moving through again until we reach winter where they've left entirely to head for Argentina. One other thing I can do is go to the connections map and select Oklahoma City. So I can find out where Swainson's hawks from Oklahoma City travel to. So now I'm getting to see where my local birds go. And in fact, the Oklahoma City Swainson's hawks are migrating down in this area. A couple other things I'll mention is the ability to see all of the data citations for this map in the data information panel, and the ability to share this map anywhere on the web. So back over to the presentation. Takeaway 2, by consolidating tracking and connectivity data for 381 migratory bird species, the Bird Migration Explorer reveals more than 4 million connections across the Americas. And this use case focuses on a conservationist or bird advocate. The Explorer empowers conservationists and advocates with science-based resources to guide campaigns. This is an example where we've searched for the location of Haines, Alaska, which is the site of the Chilkat Bald Eagle Preserve. This is where the largest concentration of bald eagles in the world comes together in late fall to feast on a late run of salmon. But this important bird area is under threat from a mining operation for copper, zinc, and gold that could leach heavy metals and sulfuric acid into the Chilkat River. So this map will help the Alaska Office of Audubon identify target audiences to engage in advocacy, because we know that everyone that lives in these selected places on this map have a direct connection to Haines through their local birds. Back to the Explorer. I'm going to go back to the home page. And this time I'll look up a location, Oklahoma City, so that we can see how it is connected to different places across the hemisphere. And it has a pretty impressive set of connections from all the way down, those same Swainson's hawks, all the way down here in Argentina, to areas really far north Arctic, even all the way over to Greenland, as well as from the west coast to the east coast of the US. I'm able to hover over these hexagons to see how many individual birds are connecting me to this place, and I can click to get a list of which species. Takeaway 3. The Bird Migration Explorer visualizes where, when, and how extensively birds encounter a variety of conservation challenges as they migrate across the hemisphere. The Explorer empowers conservationists with maps and data summaries to put their work into a hemispheric context. I'll go back to the Explorer and show you how this works. The home page, I'm going to search for the blackpoll warbler. And I will choose the Conservation Challenges map. There are multiple conservation challenges that could affect the blackpoll warbler, and I'm interested in light pollution. Light pollution is important because species that migrate during the night can get disoriented, and many of these songbirds are migrating at night, and the dark is actually important to them. So here's what we're seeing on this map. We're using a bivariate symbology where the size of the circle is telling us how abundant the birds are. So bigger circle means more birds. And then the color is telling us how much potential exposure birds have to light pollution. So we've done this by overlaying the footprint of light pollution with the abundance of blackpoll warblers at the 3-kilometer pixel level, and then scaling it up into these 150-kilometer hexagons. This is basically a measure of co-occurrence, which we also call potential exposure. So I can click play and watch this change throughout the year. Lower levels of light pollution on their wintering grounds, and then as spring migration comes, higher levels as they're flying through more urbanized areas of the United States, low levels when they're up in the boreal forest, and then higher levels again on fall migration, which you can see summarized in this bar chart. If I zoom in, I can take a closer look, and eventually I'll access this local scale of the data. So we notice high levels of light pollution in these highly urbanized areas, lower levels in rural areas. And I could go ahead and select something else like logging and compare. And then this pattern shifts because logging is much lower in urban areas and higher in rural areas. So the spatial pattern has shifted. However, the timing lines up where logging, the co-occurrence with logging is still highest on the spring and fall migration for this species. And our last takeaway is that the Migration Explorer reflects an unprecedented partnership among science, conservation, and technology organizations. We're really proud of all the logos on this slide and really grateful to these partners for their contributions of data and expertise. We've built this in partnership with Blue Raster, Postlight, Esri, and many others. You can find me and my co-authors on Twitter, and thank you for your time.